Okay, so you guys sent in a whole bunch of stuff about this genius wave, unlock your inner genius, right? Effortless transformation. I mean, who wouldn't want it?
So brain waves are basically like, imagine your brain's electrical activity. It's constantly going kind of like a symphony, right? And those waves, they come in different frequencies depending on what your brain is doing.
Okay, so it's not just one constant thing. It's changing all the time.
Right. Like when you're sleeping, those brain waves are much slower, longer wavelengths. They call those delta waves. But when you're awake and focused, they're faster beta waves.
So it's like our brains are shifting gears depending on what we're doing.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole brainwave entrainment thing so interesting, because it suggests that maybe, just maybe, you can influence those gears externally.
So instead of forcing myself to focus or meditate for hours,
You could potentially use sound or light to sort of nudge your brain in a certain direction.
I mean, sign me up, right? That sounds way easier. But how does that actually work? Like, how does listening to something actually change what's going on in our brains?
Well, it has to do with this thing called entrainment. It's this natural tendency for our brains to synchronize with external rhythms.
Yeah.
Ever notice how when you hear a catchy beat, you start tapping your foot?
Yeah, or like how you can't help but nod your head along to the music sometimes, even if you think you have no rhythm?
Exactly. It's the same principle at work.
Yeah.
Your brain picks up on those patterns and kind of wants to get in sync.
Okay, so our brains are like little dancing machines that just love a good rhythm, even if it's coming from like an audio track designed to shift our brainwaves.
Pretty much. And that's where this genius wave thing comes in. They're basically packaging specific sounds, claiming to tap into these brainwave states to unlock hidden potential and all that.
Right, so we've got these different brainwave states, and we've got this idea that we can nudge them around with sound. But where does this genius wave fit into all of this? And do their claims actually hold up?
Well, that's what we're going to find out. Because some of this stuff, it's backed by some pretty solid science, while other claims, they might be pushing it a bit.
All right, so we've got our skeptical hats on. I like it. But before we get into all that, I'm curious, what got you interested in this whole genius wave thing in the first place?
You know, I think it's the same thing that drew a lot of people to it, including probably our listeners. That idea that you could, like, effortlessly improve yourself. Who wouldn't want that?
Totally, and it's not just about becoming a genius, right? These genius wave folks are claiming all sorts of benefits, from like enhanced creativity to even influencing other people with your thoughts. It's pretty wild stuff.
Yeah, some of those claims definitely raise an eyebrow, but that's what makes this deep dive so interesting, right? We're wading into the world of real science, but also, you know, maybe a little bit of wishful thinking. So let's unpack it all and see what we find.
Okay, so let's get into some of these benefits, because I'm seeing some interesting stuff here, like enhanced focus, better sleep, less stress. And that all sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, those are some of the more common claims you'll see with brainwave entrainment, and there's actually some decent research to back up at least some of that.
Okay, so that's the more like believable stuff, I guess.
Right, but then you've got the genius wave, talking about boosting learning, even influencing other people with your theta waves. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's where I start to get a little suspicious, I'll admit. Like, theta waves, what even are those?
You know, but so theta waves, think of it like this, you know, that kind of dreamy state you're in right before you fall asleep, or when you're really deep in meditation, but not like totally focused on anything.
Okay, yeah, I think I know what you mean.
That's basically your theta wave zone. It's like that twilight zone in the brain.
Interesting. So is the genius wave saying they can tap into that to, like, help me convince my dog to stop chewing on my shoes or something?
Well, not exactly,
Yeah.
but it is true that they talk about using these theta frequencies for, like, improving relationships, even influencing other people's behavior, which,
Which sounds a little far-fetched, I gotta say.
yeah, that's definitely one of the areas where the science just isn't there to back it up yet. Look, ICENS research showing brainwave entrainment can affect things like focus, stress, even help with sleep in some cases.
Right.
But influencing other people, that's a whole different ballgame.
So, like, helping me relax enough to fall asleep? Plausible. Turning me into some kind of mind control expert? Not so much.
Exactly. And it's not to say it's impossible, but it would be so incredibly complex to study
Right.
and even harder to prove scientifically. Right now, it's mostly speculation.
Speaking of speculation, both these articles we're looking at mention NASA. And it kind of feels like they're trying to, like, borrow some of that credibility. You know, like, hey, if astronauts use it, it must be legit.
Oh, absolutely. They're definitely playing the appeal to authority card there. And look, NASA does incredible research, no doubt. But it's super important to remember context is everything.
Hmm.
Because something is studied by NASA doesn't mean it's going to, like, unlock superhuman abilities in everyday people.
Right. It's like saying, well, NASA uses rockets to get to space, so I bet I could whip one up in my garage to cure my fear of spiders. Not quite the same thing.
That's a perfect analogy. You got to be a critical thinker. Don't just take those associations at face value. Always ask yourself, what was the actual research? What do they actually find? And is that really what these claims are saying?
Okay, so healthy skepticism, even when it comes to things that sound super cool. But let's say, for argument's sake, that we are intrigued. How does just listening to something actually change the way our brains work? Like, what's the mechanism there?
So it goes back to that idea of entrainment we were talking about before. Our brains are naturally wired to synchronize with rhythmic patterns in our environment. It's like whether it's the sound of ocean waves or a catchy beat or even potentially those frequencies embedded in an audio track, our brains kind of want to get on board with that rhythm.
So it's like those little dashboard bobbleheads that dance along to the music.
Yeah,
Except in this case, it's our brainwaves doing the dance.
yeah. That's actually a pretty good way to think about it. And while there's still a lot we don't know, the research suggests that by exposing ourselves to these external rhythms, we might be able to gently kind of nudge our brainwave activity in a certain direction.
Okay, so nudge, not force. Got it. But here's what I'm wondering. Let's say I'm like totally stressed out about this presentation I have to give tomorrow, and I decide, okay, I'm going to try this genius wave thing and see if it helps. If I put on those headphones and it's all these delta waves, the ones associated with sleep, am I just going to pass out at my desk?
Probably not, no. It's not quite that literal. Your brain isn't just going to instantly flip a switch and go into deep sleep mode just because you're hearing those frequencies. It's more like, think of it as setting the mood.
Okay, so like dimming the lights and lighting some candles, it's not going to force me to relax, but it might make it easier to get there.
Exactly. And this is where things get even more interesting because even if the science of brainwave entrainment isn't 100% there yet, there's another factor at play. The placebo effect.
The placebo effect, isn't that like all in your head?
That's the amazing thing about it. It's not just in your head. It's a powerful example of how our minds and bodies are connected. It shows that what we believe, what we expect, can actually have a real impact on our physical and mental states.
So you're saying that even if this genius wave audio isn't some kind of like magical frequency formula, if I believe it's going to work, it actually might.
It's totally possible. There's this famous study where they gave patients with chronic pain a sugar pill, but they told them it was a powerful painkiller. And guess what? A lot of them experienced significant pain relief just from believing it would work. Their brains actually started releasing endorphins, which are natural painkillers.
Wow, that's wild. It's like our brains are capable of so much more than we give them credit for.
Absolutely. And the placebo effect isn't limited